Her eyes locked with his across the sand, and in that frozen moment, Mark Sullivan knew his career was over. His boss, the formidable CEO who struck fear into executives twice his age, had caught him staring at her bare chest. As a single father with mounting bills and a daughter who depended on him, he couldn't afford to lose this job. But some mistakes can't be undone, and sometimes, what seems like the end is just the beginning of something unexpected. If you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that explore the complicated moments that change our lives forever. The morning had started like any other Saturday in June. Mark had promised his 8-year-old daughter Lily a beach day, a rare treat given his 60-hour work weeks at Sullivan & Reed Financial Consulting. The irony of sharing a last name with the company wasn't lost on him. Everyone assumed he was related to the founder, when in reality, he was just a mid-level analyst struggling to make ends meet since his wife's death 3 years ago. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" Lily asked, her gap-toothed smile impossible to resist as they spread their towels on the sand. "After lunch, sweetheart," Mark replied, applying another layer of sunscreen to her freckled shoulders. "Remember what the doctor said about your sugar intake." Lily rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair only children can master. I know. Diabetes runs in our family. But one ice cream won't kill me." Mark smiled, though his heart ached. His wife Jennifer had battled type 1 diabetes her entire life before a sudden complication took her from them. Now he watched Lily like a hawk, terrified of missing any warning signs. "Tell you what, we'll split one. Deal?" "Deal." Lily squealed, already running toward the water. "Last one in is a rotten egg." Mark jogged after her, grateful for these moments of normalcy. At 36, he'd never imagined he'd be raising a child alone while trying to climb the corporate ladder. His in-laws helped when they could, but they lived 3 states away. Most days, it was just him and Lily against the world. After an hour of splashing and building sandcastles, Lily announced she was hungry. Mark reached into their cooler for the sandwiches he'd packed that morning. "I made your favorite, peanut butter and banana. You cut the crusts off?" Lily asked suspiciously. "Would I forget something that important?" Mark placed a hand over his heart in mock offense. As they ate, Mark's phone buzzed with an email notification. Despite his promise to disconnect for the day, he couldn't help checking. The Sullivan & Reed quarterly review was approaching, and his performance would determine whether he received the promotion he desperately needed. The private school Lily attended, the one Jennifer had insisted on, was raising tuition again. "Daddy, you promised no work today," Lily scolded, sounding eerily like her mother. "You're right, I'm sorry." Mark put the phone away, ashamed at how quickly he'd broken his word. "How about that ice cream now?" Lily's face lit up. "Race you to the stand. Give me a head start this time," Mark laughed, brushing sand from his shorts. "These old legs need." The words died in his throat as his eyes landed on a woman emerging from the water about 30 yards down the beach. Her back was to him, but something about her confident stride seemed familiar. Dark hair cascaded down her shoulders, water glistening on tanned skin. She reached up to wring out her hair, and Mark felt his stomach drop. Victoria Reed. His boss. The notoriously private, intimidatingly brilliant CEO of Sullivan & Reed. Mark had only interacted with her directly 3 times in his 5 years at the company. Each time, she'd been dressed in impeccable designer suits, her expression unreadable as she evaluated presentations or delivered cutting feedback. Office rumors about her were legendary: divorced twice, no children, lived for her work, and expected nothing less than perfection from her employees. He should have looked away immediately. That would have been the professional, respectful thing to do. But shock kept his eyes fixed on her as she walked toward a secluded area of the beach where a single towel lay spread on the sand. And then she turned. Mark's brain registered several things in rapid succession. First, this was definitely Victoria Reed. Second, she was at a section of beach known locally as the Free Beach, the unofficial clothing optional area. Third, she was indeed exercising that option, wearing only bikini bottoms. And fourth, she had just caught him staring. Their eyes met across the distance, and Mark watched as recognition dawned on her face, followed by something that looked like fury. He jerked his gaze away, heart hammering against his ribs. "Daddy? Are you coming?" Lily called, already several yards ahead. "Why yes, coming." Mark grabbed their bag, desperate to escape before Victoria could confront him. He'd apologize on Monday, explain it was an accident, beg for forgiveness if necessary. Right now, he needed to get his daughter away from this awkward situation. But as he hurried after Lily, he heard a voice behind him. "Mr. Sullivan." The two words, spoken with such controlled precision, stopped him in his tracks. He turned slowly, keeping his eyes firmly fixed on Victoria's face, which now bore an expression he couldn't quite read. "Ms. Reed, I am so sorry." I wasn't, he stammered, feeling his career crumbling before his eyes. Victoria had wrapped a sarong around her upper body, her posture rigid. "I believe we should discuss this." Of course, Mark nodded, wondering if he should start updating his resume immediately. "Monday morning, first thing, I'll come to your office and..." "Now, Mr. Sullivan." Her tone left no room for negotiation. "There's a cafe at the north end of the beach. 20 minutes. Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving Mark standing there with his mouth open. "Daddy, who was that lady?" Lily asked, returning to his side. Mark swallowed hard. "That was, my boss." She looked mad. "Are you in trouble?" "I hope not, sweetheart." He forced a smile. "Change of plans, we need to make a quick stop before ice cream. I have to talk to that lady about work for a few minutes." Lily's face fell. "But you promised no work today." The guilt was overwhelming. "I know, and I'm sorry. This is important. I'll make it up to you, I promise." 20 minutes later, Mark sat nervously at an outdoor table at Sandy's cafe, Lily beside him with the tablet he kept for emergencies, watching her favorite show with headphones on. He'd bought her the promised ice cream as a peace offering, though his own stomach was too knotted to eat anything. When Victoria arrived, she'd changed into a linen cover-up dress, her wet hair now pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked almost like the executive he knew from the office, except for the sandals instead of her usual heels. "Ms. Reed, again, I am profoundly sorry for what happened," Mark began immediately. "It was completely accidental and inappropriate, and I..." Victoria held up a hand, silencing him. Her eyes moved to Lily, then back to him. "Your daughter?" Mark nodded. "Yes, Lily. She's 8. Something in Victoria's expression softened slightly. "I wasn't aware you had a child." "I'm a widower," Mark explained, then immediately wondered why he'd volunteered that information. "My wife passed away 3 years ago." Victoria was quiet for a moment, studying him with those penetrating gray eyes that had made senior partners squirm during meetings. "Mr. Sullivan, I value my privacy greatly," she finally said. "What happened today was unfortunate. I understand completely. And I want to assure you it will never happen again. I respect you enormously as a professional, and I would never intentionally..." "I'm not finished," she interrupted. "As I was saying, I value my privacy. The beach is one of the few places I can be myself. Away from the company, away from the expectations." Mark nodded, unsure where this was going. "I don't appreciate being stared at by anyone, especially not an employee," Victoria continued, her voice low but intense. "However, I recognize this was an accidental encounter. What concerns me more is what you intend to do with this information." Mark blinked in confusion. "Information? About seeing me there?" At that beach. For the first time since he'd known her, Victoria Reed looked uncomfortable. It could be damaging if it became office gossip. Understanding dawned on Mark. She thought he might spread rumors about seeing her topless at the beach. The very idea was so absurd he almost laughed, but the seriousness of her expression stopped him. Ms. Reed, I would never discuss this with anyone. Ever. What you do on your personal time is absolutely none of my business, and I deeply regret that I invaded your privacy, even accidentally. Victoria studied him for a long moment, as if trying to determine his sincerity. I appreciate that, Mr. Sullivan. Though I must admit, I'm surprised. Most men in your position might see this as leverage. Mark felt a flash of indignation. I would never use something like this against anyone, especially not someone I respect professionally. That's not who I am. Daddy? Lily's voice interrupted them. She had removed her headphones and was looking between the adults curiously. Is everything okay? Mark forced a smile. Everything's fine, sweetheart. This is Ms. Reed. She's my boss at work. Lily regarded Victoria with open curiosity. The one who makes you work late all the time? Mark felt his face heat up. Lily, that's not. But to his surprise, Victoria smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her usually stern face. I'm afraid that might be my fault. Your dad is very important at our company. Lily seemed to consider this. My dad says you're the smartest person he's ever met. Mark wanted the ground to swallow him whole. He had indeed said that once, after Victoria had brilliantly salvaged a failing client relationship, but he never imagined his offhand comment to Lily would come back to haunt him like this. Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly as she looked at Mark. Does he now? Lily, why don't you finish your show while Ms. Reed and I talk for just another minute? Mark suggested desperately. Lily shrugged and put her headphones back on, but not before adding, he also said you're scary, but I don't think you're scary. You're pretty. Once Lily was safely back in her cartoon world, Mark covered his face with his hands. I am so sorry. Kids, you know. No filter. When he dared to look up, he was stunned to see Victoria Reed, terror of the boardroom, breaker of careers, notorious perfectionist, trying not to laugh. Mr. Sullivan, your daughter is delightful. Thank you. She's everything to me. Mark hesitated, then decided honesty was his only option at this point. Look, Ms. Reed, I understand if you feel you need to take some kind of action regarding what happened today. But I want you to know that I'm a single parent trying my best to provide for my daughter. This job means everything to us. Victoria's amusement faded, replaced by something more thoughtful. Are you asking me not to fire you because you're a single father? No, Mark said firmly. I'm asking you to judge me on my work, which I believe speaks for itself. If you feel what happened today warrants termination, that's your prerogative as CEO. But I hope you'll consider that it was a genuine accident and that I've always conducted myself professionally at work. Victoria was quiet for so long that Mark began mentally calculating how long his savings would last if he lost his job today. The Anderson portfolio, she finally said. Your analysis last quarter. Walk me through your thinking. Mark blinked at the sudden change of subject but recovered quickly. The Anderson portfolio had been one of his most challenging projects, a wealthy family with complicated assets and even more complicated interpersonal dynamics. For the next 15 minutes, he explained his approach, the obstacles he'd encountered, and how he'd ultimately structured their investments to accommodate both growth and the family's unique needs. Victoria listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed how closely she'd been following his work, something he hadn't realized. When he finished, she nodded once. That's what I thought. You're wasted in your current position. I'm sorry. You should be managing your own team by now, Mr. Sullivan. Your work consistently exceeds expectations, yet you've never pushed for advancement. Why is that? Mark glanced at Lily, who was still absorbed in her show. Honestly? Being a single parent means I have to be careful about taking on additional responsibilities. Lily needs me home by 6 most nights. The current role allows me some flexibility. So you've deliberately limited your career progression for your daughter's sake? Put that way, it sounded either noble or foolish. Mark wasn't sure which. I suppose I have. Victoria tapped her fingers on the table, appearing to come to a decision. The Morgan team needs a new director. The hours would be similar to what you work now, but the compensation would increase by approximately 40%. Plus profit sharing. Mark stared at her, certain he'd misheard. Are you offering me a promotion? I'm offering you the position you should have had 2 years ago, if you hadn't been so determined to fly under the radar. Victoria's eyes were sharp. Unless you're not interested? No. I mean, yes, I'm interested. Very interested. Mark's mind raced, trying to process this unexpected turn. But why now? Why here? Victoria glanced at Lily, then back to Mark. Let's just say I've gained some perspective today. About you. About what drives you. She stood up, smoothing her dress. We'll discuss the details on Monday. 9 a.m., my office. Mark stood as well, still stunned. Thank you, Ms. Reed. I don't know what to say. You could start with promising to stay away from the north end of this beach in the future, she suggested, but there was a hint of humor in her voice. Absolutely. Consider it done. Victoria nodded, then hesitated. Mr. Sullivan, Mark. One more thing. Yes? Your daughter was right about one thing. I am responsible for your late hours sometimes. That will change. Work-life balance is important, especially for a single parent. She glanced at Lily again. She seems like a remarkable child. She is, Mark agreed, still trying to reconcile this version of Victoria Reed with the intimidating executive he thought he knew. My sister has a daughter about her age. They do this art camp every summer. I could send you the information, if you're interested. That would be great. Thank you. Victoria nodded once more, then turned to leave. She'd taken only a few steps when she paused and looked back. And Mark? What happened today? Let's agree it never did. What happened? Mark asked innocently. We just ran into each other at the beach. Nothing unusual about that. The smile she gave him then was different from any he'd seen before, not the tight, professional one from meetings, nor the amused one from earlier. This one reached her eyes, creating small crinkles at the corners that made her look younger, more approachable. Smart man. I can see why I'm promoting you. As she walked away, Mark sank back into his chair, trying to process everything that had just happened. Somehow, the most mortifying moment of his professional life had turned into an unexpected opportunity. Is she gone? Lily asked, removing her headphones again. Yes, sweetheart. She's gone. She was nice. Not scary at all. Lily licked the last of her ice cream from her fingers. Can we go swimming again now? Mark looked at his daughter, this resilient, perceptive child who had weathered the loss of her mother and adapted to their new life with more grace than he could have imagined. He thought about the promotion, about what it would mean for them. Better schools for Lily. Maybe finally moving out of their cramped apartment. Perhaps even some help with childcare so he wouldn't always be rushing between work and home. Absolutely, he said, feeling lighter than he had in years. Race you to the water? Lily was already running toward the waves before he finished the sentence. 6 months later, Mark sat in his new office, reviewing the quarterly numbers for the Morgan team. Under his leadership, they'd exceeded projections by 12%, a fact that had not gone unnoticed by the executive team. A knock at his door pulled his attention away from the spreadsheets. Victoria Reed stood in the doorway, as impeccably dressed as always in a charcoal suit that somehow managed to be both professional and flattering. "Do you have a moment, Mark?" she asked, though they both knew she didn't need to ask. "Of course, come in." He stood as she entered, still not entirely comfortable with their new dynamic. Since his promotion, they'd developed a working relationship based on mutual respect, but there was always that undercurrent of awareness about how it had begun. Victoria closed the